Hi everybody. In today's Ask David, I'm going to answer the question, what type of lens should I get for macro work? Hey David, what type of lens should I get for macro work? Well, there's not a whole lot to go on there, and there's a lot of different types of macro imaging. So there are accordingly lots of different types of macro lenses. A 50mm macro lens is a pretty common macro distance. Sigma used to make a really fantastic one, a 50mm f2.8. It's the best macro lens I've ever used. Really great in terms of performance. 100mm, like the 100mm Minolta f4 or the 100mm Canon f3.5 are also really good options for macro lenses. Now, what those really do, the difference between 50mm and 100mm, or 15mm is this new 15mm macro that came out last year, showed, the difference is your operating distance from your subject. So with a 50mm lens, you can get one-to-one reproduction when you're really close to your subject. With a 100mm, you can be a little bit further away. There's also 200mm lenses in macro that will reproduce up to one-to-one that have really good performance. Subject operating distance is important with some subjects, such as insects, where you're going to illuminate them with a flash on the macro lens, and also don't want to spook them by getting too close with your lens, which to them probably looks like a big mouth coming to eat them. So if your macro subject is going to be a living insect or bird or something other than that you're trying to chase down, a longer focal length macro lens will give you better results and a higher successful capture rate. If you're going to be photographing things like stamps or coins, your most important consideration needs to be flat field reproduction. And not all macro lenses are created equal in this regard. Flat field reproduction is simply how well does the lens, which is a curved piece of glass, take a flat subject and reproduce it as a flat image. The newer macro lenses are pretty good at that. The Sigma that I mentioned earlier, the 50mm 2.8, is really exceptional at that. That's not the case for all of them. So if you're going to be doing flat field work, make sure to look into flat field reproduction. Another way to do good flat field macro work is with an enlarger lens. Enlarger lenses are designed to take a flat negative and put it on a flat sheet of paper without distorting it or adding any image character. So an enlarger lens on a macro bellows is a really good way to get very accurate flat field reproduction. Okay, so those are some lens options, but macro lenses, frankly, are really expensive. There's some of the more expensive lenses you can buy because the engineering that goes into them to make them reproduce images well at macro ranges is pretty sophisticated. For many types of subjects you want to get a macro photo of, you can simply move your lens away from your camera to enlarge it. And that's the way that it was done back with large format cameras. Simply keep moving the lens further and further away and you get a bigger reproduction. You also get a little bit more softness, but generally that's okay because lenses provide ample sharpness in most cases. Here's an image I took with this 135mm lens on a macro bellows of a praying mantis with my Pentax K7 to get larger than one-to-one reproduction. A really good, affordable way to get macros is to get a macro bellows and put a lens on the front of it. The cheapest way to do that is to get an M42 bellows, some M42 lenses, many of which are really sharp, and an M42 to your camera mount adapter, and use it that way. That's going to give you the ability, especially if you have a chipped M42 adapter, to still do through the lens metering with an inexpensive macro bellows and an inexpensive lens, but still achieve really good results. That also allows you to use any lens as a macro lens. You could use a 135 and get really far away from your subject. That photo I showed you of the praying mantis, it was about 5 or 6 feet away from me. I couldn't touch it with my arm. It was that far away from me. So there are a lot of ways to skin the cat. You don't necessarily need a macro lens, but a macro lens is a good way to get a dedicated lens on your camera that can focus at infinity and then focus on macros subjects if you're taking it and going out to the wild to photograph insects, let's say.